Sports Corner.
All right. Welcome to the special Super Bowl 51 edition of the Sports Corner podcast. I'm Tyler Madden.
I'm Jason Owen.
I am Mr. Doyle.
So the Patriots were able to pull off, in my opinion, the greatest upset. It was the greatest Super Bowl game that I've ever watched, as they were go on to beat the Falcons 34-28. What do you think about that game, Jason? Because I know you were in your prediction. I think you were undefeated in your predictions. You weren't wrong until the last one.
Yeah, I did have the Falcons taking this game, and we'll talk a little bit later about what kind of happened in the game and why I think that the Patriots were able to pull off the upset they did. I'm gonna give it a week. Right after the game, I thought to myself, this might be the greatest Super Bowl I've ever seen. I'm gonna give it some time because, in my opinion, the game, and if you look at the game as a whole, it was like a great game, and the comeback was huge. But there was never a point in time where both teams were very competitive against each other. It was like a team owned this quarter, a team owned this quarter, and the Falcons owned three of them, and just gave it all away in the fourth. But that's my only issue with the game as a whole, is that it was never really a back and forth.
You look at the fact that you've never seen in the Super Bowl a team come back from any points that they were down more than 10 points, and you saw the Patriots come back and down 25 at one time. Do you think, Mr. Doyle, that makes it the greatest game in Super Bowl history, the fact they're able to come back from being down 25 points?
Well, it's not the greatest game if you were cheering for the Falcons, right?
Yeah, maybe only for us up here in New England, right?
And I think living in New England, we get maybe a false sense of the Patriots' popularity, because around the country, people don't like them. But a comeback like that, and Jason, yeah, that's a really good point. It wasn't like a back and forth tight game. There was huge swings back and forth. But I think a comeback like that, and the way Brady drove them downfield, to score, to take the lead. And once they won the coin flip, I just thought, okay, the defense doesn't come back on the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think, for me, it was the best Super Bowl I've ever witnessed. First time in history that a Super Bowl has gone to overtime. So that alone distinguishes it. But, it was just stunning. I think we all gave up on the Patriots. And to come back like that, it was amazing. He's the best quarterback in history. And I think he sealed that, right?
Yeah, because you look at he single-handedly drove the Falcons defense into the ground in that fourth quarter, and especially in that overtime and a little bit in the third quarter, because you look at just how they were running the ball. They were just pushing up the field, trucking up the field. But I think the biggest play of the game was when it was right after, because the thing that I think the Falcons did wrong, and that I think they're gonna look at themselves and say, why didn't we do it, is when they stopped running the football. That was the biggest thing, because you look at when they started to run the ball, and the two biggest plays in the game that I think really changed the momentum was when Matt Ryan got sacked. They were still in field goal range. What was that, with a few minutes to go in the fourth quarter? They were still in field goal range, but then you get the worst penalty that you could have ever seen. It was a clear flag on the play that pushes them back another 10 or 15 yards to push them out of field goal range. Because if they kicked that field goal, we'd be talking about a completely different game. We'd be talking about the fact of how they were so close, and we'd be questioning if Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time because of that one penalty.
Well, it's interesting that you bring it up, because I think ultimately what did it for the Falcons in the end is that when you look at games like this and you look at big comebacks, oftentimes the criticism on the coaches is that they played too conservative down the stretch, that they didn't take any chances, and that they just kind of went through the motions, and people were able to take advantage of that. The Falcons were the opposite. They played way too aggressive towards the end of the game. They had a 28-3 lead and ran the ball 5 times throughout the rest of the game, and that's not smart football. You don't take 3 shots downfield in that situation. You take what you can get. You try to put up more points, and you definitely want to put up more points and try to put the game out of reach. But you don't want to play that aggressive. Clock control is still important at that point in the game. And
do you think also, Mr. Doyle, that when you look at when the Falcons challenged that last play, was that the catch off of the foot when Edelman was that the one that they challenged it? Because I thought when I was sitting there, and because I knew you could clearly see after you saw the replay that the catch was good, and they lose that last timeout. Do you think that played a big factor in the outcome of the game, losing that last timeout?
Yeah, it was a factor. I don't know if it was a huge factor, because I just feel like at that point the momentum was so clearly behind the Patriots. I felt like there was no stopping them at that point. But yeah, I think if you looked at that replay, and if they had people up in the booth, they would have seen that it was a catch, right? So why challenge it? But going back to your point about the their approach. I mean, you've got to eat up the clock. You've got to lead like that. And then right down to that play when it was, Tyler, you were mentioning, like, it was, I think, second and, I don't know what, 10 on the 23, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're in field goal range. Run it up the gut, kick a field goal, and then really it's the game's over then, right? Because the Patriots have to score twice. It seems simple. I'm not Vince Lombardi here. Like, it just seems like if I'm watching and thinking, like, am I missing something, or why don't they just kick a field goal? Why don't they?
It was really odd. And what gets lost in the game, I feel, is how well the running backs for the Falcons played. Devonta Freeman was averaging 9 yards a carry throughout the game, and they just completely took him out. And their ability to throw the ball out of the backfield was huge. They had about 70 yards off of passes in the backfield. One went for a touchdown. It was like a huge factor in the game, and they just completely went away from it in the second half. And I don't know if they thought New England was going to adjust for that and they weren't going to try to run the ball as much because it wasn't going to work. But at the end of the day, that's when you keep the ball on the ground, you avoid taking big losses, and you kill as much clock as you can.
The best part about the Falcons, going back to how they can run and they can throw and catch the ball, that's the biggest thing, because you look at one team saying, oh, they have a really good run game or they have a really good pass game, but you look at how, because I think when they went into it, they wanted to shut down Julio Jones. That's obviously the biggest goal because he's the biggest threat, but they were given the run up. But then every time they'd move the ball up, and it felt like every time they were on that big third down play, they'd go to Julio Jones, who would just make another amazing catch. There was a lot of them, but I think I don't know, talk about jinxing things, but Arthur Blank, the owner of the Falcons, really jinxed them going on the field in the third quarter, because usually don't only go down with like 2 minutes to go in the game or something like that. But then going on there, I think he was very confident. But
they are. I think that's one of the reasons that Matt Ryan was so good this year, because they have such a good running game. Because it's rare in this current NFL. It's such a pass-first league, and they have such a balanced offense, and they were running it so well. I mean, the thing that struck me is, like, you had to figure that Brady was going to put points on the board. They weren't going to hold him to a field goal all game, right? So you're up 28-3, and you can sit on it, but I don't know. You knew the Patriots were going to make a run, and in this game, they were going to score eventually. The Falcons weren't going to just hold them down, so it's like I don't know. I'm not sure what they were thinking,
It was such an odd strategy.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that people aren't going to bring up, because Julio Jones had a great game as a receiver, and he made some crazy catches, and I will argue that Julio Jones' catch, the toe tap on the sideline, was better than Edelman's catch, simply because Edelman's catch came down to being in the right place at the right time, and concentration obviously played a big role in that.
Kind of an acrobatic.
yeah, he had to have
What Julio Jones was able to do at 6'3", like 225, like have that kind of body control to get your feet in bounds when all your momentum's leading you out was insane. But one thing I noticed that Matt Ryan didn't do, and I think he got in his own head a little bit, is there was a couple third downs early in the game and late in the game where they weren't able to convert, and Julio Jones was wide open. And I think a lot of that came down to is I think he was so focused on not focusing on Julio Jones and looking at his other receivers and trying to not point in on Julio that he just completely missed them a couple times in the game on wide open plays.
And then we move on to after the game, and then there was obviously like an underlying thing for the Patriots that if they were able to win this Super Bowl, they'd go after the evil commissioner. But the evil commissioner is probably only up here in New England. I bet you everybody, because not a lot of people like the Patriots. Outside of New England, everybody probably loved Goodell, but it was kind of like the sports nerd in me waiting to see the shot of Goodell and Brady together. And they went to a shot on TV of Goodell talking in the stadium, not with the camera microphone that you could hear on TV. You couldn't hear a word that Goodell was saying because he was being booed so loud in that stadium.
Yeah, you saw Belichick and Brady were sort of on the periphery of the shot, talking and laughing. And, I'd love to know what they were talking about. That it was a lot of built-up drama there. There was also a shot of Goodell congratulating Brady at one point, prior to the trophy ceremony, and he was shaking his hands. And someone got a picture. This is a great sort of photojournalist. Got a picture of Brady glaring at, and he looked like his jaw was like grinding. He was staring at Goodell, and boy, if looks could kill.
I would have loved to have seen Giselle and Goodell shake hands. And Roger Goodell. That would have been a very interesting.
I think the interesting question the game raises, the Super Bowl raises now is, are the Patriots the greatest dynasty of all time? And I think the one that they're up against would probably be the Niners.
Right.
Those like late 80s, early 90s Niners that won the same number of championships, won 5 championships over the same number of years. I think they did it. However, they did it with 2 different quarterbacks, which I think gives them a slight edge in the situation. Because one of the things that impresses me about the Patriots is, despite how different like their rosters have looked, the 2 most important positions in football is coach and quarterback.
Right.
And they've had no turnover in that department over the last 16 years, and that's impressive when you look at everything.
I think that goes with the Belichick mindset of do your job. I think when you look, because you don't necessarily go for the people, look at how he started the dynasty with. He didn't take the best quarterback that was on the board with his first draft pick that he had. He waited and he took this guy and didn't, hey, look at what happened. But you look at who he's done it with over the years. If you look at, like, the only star receiver he's had is Randy Moss.
Right.
Well, Wes Welker was like a big...
And Wes Welker. But.
Yeah, they had good sliders. He, the salary cap era, too, was a huge part of this for the Patriots. Doing it in the salary cap era. That's why you see the roster turned over and so many different players. Whereas, like, dynasties of the past, there's more consistency for the core group of players. The Patriots have had less of that, except, Belichick and even the coaching staff. They've lost assistant coaches over the years. And, so, like, Belichick is, like, the mainstay. And, you have a quarterback who's arguably the best ever. And then you go from there, and it's a system, that works. So, the evil empire in football, basically, right? That's what they do around the country.
Does this, Jason, this is more a question towards you, do you think that this game cemented Brady as the best quarterback in the history of the NFL?
I do. I know I've been very adamant against saying that for a couple of years because, I mean, it's tough. I'm a Broncos fan. You never want to say anything good about the Patriots. But it's almost impossible to be this good, this consistently over the... And he's 39 right now, and he's still playing at a high level. And I think consistency is key when you're looking at anything. And at this point in the game, in his career, you can't argue against Tom Brady.
And you look at, there's another interesting part in this too, is that, and I didn't know this until I found it out after the game, but Dan Quinn was the defensive coordinator for the Seahawks back in 2014. So this is the second time in his career that the Patriots have had the best of him in the last chance opportunities.
Second time in 3 years? Yeah. I mean, I think Brady, going back to whether he's the greatest, there's a lot of ways to evaluate that. You could look at numbers, you look at titles, right? He stacks up with everyone, right? Just in terms of, I think what this game did, and he's had a lot of great moments, but like the drive, right? The famous drive at the 49ers, and there were like moments sometimes in these sort of iconic moments that you remember about a player, and that sometimes elevates a guy. And I think the way he led them back in this game, drove them downfield to tie it and then win it. That's like, that kind of distinguishes, that almost puts him over the top, because they have all the numbers and all the titles and everything else, and then when you do something that, is going to be shown on NFL films forever, right? That's what kind of, I think, separates him, and he is the greatest.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because until now, I mean, Brady had 4 Super Bowl wins, but I don't think he's ever been the guy who made the play.
No.
In the Super Bowl.
It was Malcolm Butler in 2014.
Vinatieri won was huge in the first couple. And obviously, Brady's at the center of all that, but he's never had that, like, standout play in his career.
Not like the defining drive.
Yeah, but now he's going to be able to say he had a 25-point comeback.
The greatest comeback in arguably the greatest Super Bowl game ever, and it was him. And he had, like, the most yards, right, in Super Bowl history. So, I mean, that game, in a way, it's funny, despite all of his his great resume and all the accolades and all the records, this game almost cemented it for him. It was important for his legacy, the way he did it.
Because it wasn't just the play.
Right.
It was the entire fourth quarter in the first, few minutes that they were on the field for the overtime. Because, like Mr. Doyle hinted at earlier, the second that I knew that the Patriots won the coin toss, I figured there's not a chance that Brady's going to give up that ball.
Yeah. Well, there was one of the people who I think is going to get the most hate in Atlanta after this game is Vic Beasley, because I don't know if no one really remembers the play for whatever reason, but right before the touchdown run to James White to win the game, Brady threw a fade in the back to the back of the end zone.
When I saw that,
which was this close.